And speaking of control of the White House and the majority in Congress, looks like Republicans will be leading the nation for the next 2 years.
Political science professor Stephen Maynard Caliendo joins us live now to talk about, well, gosh, what a big night it was. Let's start with the presidential race and the voters who Trump apparently won over, or maybe who just came out and voted. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's lots to talk about here. We could talk for a long time. I think we cannot ignore the gender component to what happened last night in the presidential race. Bernie Moreno just made a reference to the red wave that was supposed to materialize in 2022. Certainly materialized last night. Kamala Harris was able to win with women voters. There was a gender gap again. What there wasn't, however, was as large of a gender gap as there was in 2016 or in 2020, excuse me. And so as a result, we're sitting here thinking about what it's going to be like to have another Trump presidency.
Does that gap surprise you? The fact that my understanding is she didn't do as well with women as Biden did?
That's right. Not as well as Biden did, not even as well as Hillary Clinton did. But she also didn't lean into gender in the same way. She certainly had reproductive rights at the center of her platform. But if you remember in 2016, there were Hillary Clinton T-shirts and mugs that said, "I'm with her." The notion of making history, the first woman president. Kamala Harris didn't do any of that kind of stuff. She didn't talk about the history that she would make as the first woman president. She tried to sort of run a gender-neutral campaign, and I don't know if that was the right decision or the wrong decision, but it certainly isn't a decision that made a difference in terms of helping her get the electoral votes she needed last night.
Yeah, a lot of analysts were talking about that, not pushing that, also being a black woman and not pushing that either. And I think
that's exactly
that
right.
We won't know, how that played with voters really, or maybe we do now.
I think so. Look, I mean, when we say there's a gender, that the gender component matters, it isn't just that she's a woman and he's a man and they chose him. It's the way that she was talked about. It's the way that her intelligence was questioned. It's the way that her laugh was dissected. It's the way that there were suggestions on the right that she slept her way to the top. These are all very gendered attacks. They're not just attacks. And so we can't separate completely her gender from the way that she was campaigned against. And so we're going to have to take a long time to really analyze how this all played out.
And what it means for the voter electorate in our country.
That's right.
Their views.
Yeah. One thing I want to talk to you about is that so many expected this to be a much closer race, and this seems to be a very decisive victory for Trump. What are your thoughts on that as far as who turned out?
I would call it a mandate. There's no question, and it's not just that. We say it was decisive. It certainly is. It was a close race still, but we have a number of states that are still outstanding, and if he wins those, that's a clear victory. More important, though, he may win the popular vote. I mean, a Republican presidential candidate has not won the popular vote in a very long time. I didn't think I'd ever see it again in my lifetime, to be honest. And so there is a clear message being sent by the American people last night about what their preferences are. What's going to happen next? What are we going to see? Is he going to be able to keep the campaign promises that he made, or was it really bluster? Because a lot of the folks that supported him said, I'm supporting him in spite of the fact that he's saying these things, in spite of the fact that he's sort of taking a hard turn to the right. But we'll see. Maybe it was bluster. Maybe that he's going to govern in a way similar to how he governed in his first term. If Kamala Harris's surrogates are right, it's going to be a very different Trump administration because he's not going to have people around him that are going to serve as guardrails the way they did the first time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know so much to unpack, and I know you'll be back with us in the next hour.
We'll do it again. We'll do it again the next hour.
Talking about some more related issues.
You got it.
Stephen Maynard Caliendo, thank you so much for being here as always.